Hey, yo, welcome back to Right at the Wire. Well, it's an all 3-year-old stakes pick 5 at Gulfstream this weekend. And I just think that's an awesome idea. And I hope more tracks take advantage of that type of scenario because it looks pretty cool. We've got some big time races. It's anchored, of course, by the Holy Bull, which we're all looking forward to see. Fierceness' debut this year. So let's get into it. So this is the all 3-year-old stakes late pick 5, and I think it's just a terrific idea for a sequence. It's run at Gulfstream Park. Races 8 through 12 on Saturday the 3rd, and leg 1 is the Swedish Chance Stakes. It's a grade 3. It's the 8th race, running a mile and a 16th on the turf for 3-year-old fillies, and we do have individual postings on all of these stakes races. So for more in-depth analysis, I'd encourage you to take a look at those. In this field, Life's an Audible sticks out. Ran in the Breeders' Cup turf. We saw him at Saratoga, and making her way in the 3-year-old campaign. We've also got Madam Mischief and Pharaoh's Wine, a couple who were on the scene for a while, and we do have some new shooters, most notably. Style Points and Dynamic Pricing, who just graduated their maiden, and Milliot, who's a European import, who had a nice showing in her first race in the States. So if we look at how we're going to play this field, to me, experience is a really important factor in considering the horses, given the fact that we have a lot that are kind of green, don't have a lot of races under their belt. And for that reason, we're looking at Life's an Audible, most notably. The thing about most notable, or Life's an Audible, rather, is that I don't know if the killer instinct is there. And she's running quite a bit like her father, who we kind of wondered if he really knew what he was supposed to be doing out in the track. On the track. She certainly has some ability. We saw that at Saratoga, and ran an okay Breeders' Cup Juvenile. I didn't think that was a bad race, but her last one in particular, it seemed like Irad really had to get into her to get her going, and consequently, she didn't engage in the race until late and came with a big kick, but it was too little too late. So I do wonder about this horse's ability to win races. Certainly to compete, I don't think that's an issue, and could very well progress and get up in time in this one. So we'll use Life's an Audible, but not overly confident at what likely will be a very short price. Madam Mischief has shown steady progression, and I think another move forward here is very possible. And with another jump, could certainly get the job done. And may possess a little more of a killer instinct, and that makes her attractive in this spot. I really like Pharaoh's Wine. At 2 years old, showed a slow, steady progression, got a little better with every single race, and culminated with a second in the Jessamine, and nobody was beating Buku that day, so we're not going to hold that against her, but she ran a really nice race, and if you consider she was wide all the way around the track, it makes it even look more attractive. The last race she ran in came off the turf, so we can kind of draw a line through it, but it did represent a tightener, and she did get an okay third, so I fully expect that this race she's going to run a top effort, being back on the grass, and I think you're going to get a decent price, so I really like Pharaoh's Wine. Milliot made a very favorable impression coming over from the States in her U.S. debut, worked her way through traffic, showed some maturity, and closed like a freight train. I just love that acceleration I saw out of her. Being the lone closer in this field, I think is an advantage. She's going to need to be a little more forwardly placed, but there's no reason to believe that she can't do that and be effective. So Milliot, to me, the prime win candidate. As an alternative, I really like Pharaoh's Wine. I think you've got to go with value here, and I do like the horses that are a little more experienced. Milliot, I just like the talent, and I think that's really what I could see more than anything else. So not a little light on experience, but I think high on talent and potential. So if we look at leg 2, this is the Swale Stakes. It's the 9th race. It's 7 furlongs for 3-year-olds, a grade 3. And this is always an interesting race because you get a lot of times horses who, they tried at 2 turns, it didn't work out, so they move them back to 7 furlongs. And in some cases, it's used as a developmental race to get back on the Derby trail later on. So if we look at this field, Ben Tornado is pretty towering over this field, a horse for the course who just has a speed edge. And I think, as one at this distance, there's a lot to like about Ben Tornado. But there are some alternatives. Grand Mo the First, Bill Al, Risk It we've seen in quite a few stakes races, as well as Legalize. And then we have our lone closer, Frankie's Empire. So it's a pretty good field, with Ben Tornado certainly being at the top of the class. Ben Tornado we'll talk about first. The only blemish is the Reality Stakes last, where he still mustered a third while weakening late. And so 2 turns, not his thing. Who cares in this race? Prior to that, in the Affirmed, he continued his progression at this distance with a driving win. And he's on the rail here, so he's going to be able to get to where he wants to and save all the ground. All systems are go. Ben Tornado, very logical win candidate and the pick to win this. But if we look at a couple of alternatives, we'll look at Grand Mo the First. And this will be his first try on dirt, but that shouldn't be an issue since he's by Uncle Mo. And it's encouraging that his fractions on the all-weather track at Gulfstream were improving with distance and class, increasing at each prior to the Zuma Beach. And he ran an okay third there. He's been given plenty of time to fill out, and the tabs that says he's ready. So I'm expecting a good effort, and laying off the pace should put him in the mix, and I think you're going to get a price. So if you're looking for an alternative, you might think about Grand Mo the First. Bill Al, this is the kind of race that 3-year-olds like Bill Al go into, where he bombed out in 2 routes in the Nashua and the Remsen being 2 turns, and it just didn't work out. So I think Bill Mott throws him back in here, maybe to work out some kinks. He does have 2-turn pedigree, so perhaps we'll see him again. This will be a race to sort of see what he has more than anything else. The 3 prior to the Remsen show, a horse is learning to settle and manage his speed, and I think that's always good to see. And he's fresh off the bench, so I think he's going to fire at a more comfortable distance for him, and a move forward is likely. I'm just not sure it's enough to get the job done here, but you probably will get a decent price, one to consider, probably more for the exotics. Then we look at Frankie's Empire, we'll talk about. He's very logical, being a closer in a 7-furlong race. He ran huge off the bench at 16-1, taking advantage of a hot pace and an open rail. And he does have a big stride, which I noticed and I think is always good to see. His late fraction has been getting progressively better with each start. So another move forward is very possible. And he's the most logical upset candidate, being the lone closer. The only concern I may have is that running that big off the bench, much bigger than efforts he had prior, a regression is possible. However, I think he's probably more likely for underneath. But if you are looking for a horse who can upset the apple cart, perhaps Frankie's Empire is one to consider. Leg 3 is the Forward Gal Stakes. It's a grade 3. It's the 10th race run at 7 furlongs for 3-year-old fillies. So this is sort of the female complement to the Swale. You look at the field, and it's pretty interesting. It's pretty well balanced, I think. Scalable being the Todd Pletcher trainee, probably the most notable of the group. But you also have Whit Waters Rand, who made a favorable impression, and R. Harper Rose, who's really solid on the front end. This field is there's a lot of different ways to go here, without question. And I can certainly see there's many different ways tacks you can take. I've settled on these 4 as the most logical. I think this race is one you have to spread. R. Harper Rose, the last may have been a bit too far, but kept on for a good second. Owns a win at the distance and a class edge. I think that she's going to be awful tough to deal with on the front end. So I think R. Harper Rose, one to think about. Nikitas broke the maiden at the distance, but did so in kind of a grinding fashion, watching the way she runs. And Chad Brown's barn has woken up, but that running style tells me that she may be at a disadvantage, and maybe 2 turns is probably more a better bet with her, particularly going against like our Harper Rose and Scalable. So Nikitas, to me, one you think about more for under. Scalable appears to have licked the braking issues that were keeping her in the rear. She had a real problem getting out of the gate in all her starts at 2, but came out at 3 and showed that she can get, they've worked that out and corrected it. No surprise, being trained by Todd Pletcher. And she looks pretty good to me coming into this race. She'll have to chase down R. Harper Rose, but another move forward gets the job done here, and I think Scalable is an obvious win candidate here. Witwater's Ran had a nice 2-turn win in the Mazarine at Woodbine and saved ground and swinging out late to get up with plenty left. So she looked awful good to me. 2 great angles for me are always all-weather to dirt and route to sprint. You have both of those here. Now, there has been a little time between races, so that does reduce the effect of those angles to a degree. But the only concern after a long layoff, that this might be used as a springboard for an Oaks prep around 2 turns. That's the only thing I'm kind of thinking, trying to read the minds of the trainers. But that's the only thing I could think of. The class level of the Woodbine races are comparable to or better than many the field has run in. So I think she's a good fit, and I think you might get some decent value as the 2nd or 3rd choice. So Witwater's Rand, I really like in this race. Leg 4 is the Kittens Joy Stakes. It's a grade 3. It's the 11th race. It's running 1 1/16 on the turf for 3-year-olds. And if we look at this field, we do have a couple that we saw back on at 2 years old, most notably Agate Road and Noted, who were both stakes performers, stakes competitors. And but we do have some new shooters like Hammerstein and Tokyo, who just won on the front end. And First World War, we've seen on dirt most recently, but now shifting back to turf. So it's an interesting field, and it does offer quite a few options. And if we take a look at the field, the ones we've settled on, Tokayo, his class ratings have improved, and his prospects certainly have since moving to turf. And he had a nice wire job last time in the Dania Beach, albeit with a small field, and he did have things his own way all the way around the track. It was his best effort in his highest class test yet, and that's always encouraging. Though it was a small field, as we mentioned, and it was kind of an okay field. He has company this time, and quite a few who want to be up near the lead. You see all those EPs, who are stalkers and pressers. Quokka, I'm not so sure, will want the lead, but has done so in the past. So I don't think it's going to be quite as easy this time, but it is possible that he looks to have the ability to wire this field, and he would need another jump forward, I think. So it's kind of marginal, but I think Tokayo is one that you can think about in this race. First World War is, he had a nice Mucho Macho Man on the dirt, but he was caught by Otello late. He started on turf graduating, so that's not going to be a problem. He is progressing as the class levels rise, which is ideal for a 3-year-old. And excuse me, I'm going to expect a good effort, but it is a little troubling that he seems to get caught late. And the last race, he really didn't have any excuses. He just wasn't good enough. And the Mucho Macho Man, we're still wondering about how good a race that really was. However, I think on turf, it's a little different story. Perhaps he's a little more effective. So I think he's one that certainly we have to think about. If we look at new shooters, Hammerstein is one that I really like in this spot. Brian Lynch is on fire at Gulfstream, so we have to take him seriously. He got a career high off the bench with a really professional maiden score. It was aided tactically by a forward ride from Castellano, who he doesn't have here, but he showed good kick first time on grass, and so better's to be expected. He will have to step it up, there's no question about that, but I think you're going to get a price, and Hammerstein, I think, is one that looks very logical to move forward. And then we'll talk about the 2 Pletchers. And, of course, you always have to take them seriously in 3-year-old stakes races. The first we'll talk about is Noted. Everything about him on paper says that you could almost single him in this race. He's very, very logical. But here's a couple of things about him that you might want to consider. He does win, but he always seems to just get up in time, and in all his races on grass, that is. And I just wonder if he's running to the level of competition rather than running against himself. And that's really a big issue for me with 3-year-olds. He does have nice back class, and he just eked it out against an okay field in the Pulpit. You'd like to think he would have had a little more dominating effort than that. He's going to fire off the bench, and he's certainly a win candidate, but I don't think he's a lock, and again, because I think he seems to run to the level of his competition, and for that reason, I think he's a bit of an underlay, but certainly one that you have to consider as a win candidate. Agate Road, wasn't he supposed to win the Dania Beach pretty easily? There's been a lot of hype about this horse. He certainly needs pace to run to, which I don't know that he's going to get here, as Tokayo is likely going to be the lone speed again, and will probably try to slow it down like he did in his previous race. He had a decent Breeders' Cup, but he looks more of a grinder to me, which doesn't really set up well for this type of race. And moreover, I don't see the progression. He hasn't really put himself significantly ahead in weaker fields, and he's another one that I think is an underlay. And I think tactically he's at a bit of a disadvantage because of the way he runs. Do you have to include him? Sure. Absolutely. He could win this race, but I want to try to find value against these two because I think they're vulnerable in certain spots. And if I'm going to look for one I think looks awful good at a price, it's Hammerstein. The other two, just Deadpan and Freedom Principle, they're asterisk by. That's more for the exotics. I think you could pick and choose whichever one you want. I don't consider them to be win candidates, but underneath more likely. So now we come to the leg that we're all most interested in, the Holy Bull. It's a grade 3 running a mile and a 16th. It's the last race in the sequence, and it's for 3-year-olds. And this one is a very interesting race in some respects, but in others, it's very boring. If we look at this field, you do have a couple of horses who just won last out, most notably Otello in the Mucho Macho Man, and then, of course, Fierceness, our Breeders' Cup Juvenile champion. There are a couple of new shooters. Hades made some pretty good noise in his last race, and Inveigle has been knocking on the door stakes-wise. And then we have Dancing Groom and No More Time, a couple that have made a little bit of noise and may do so again. So if we take a look at this field now, we'll start with Fierceness. What's not to like? The post could be better, given the fact that this race does start on a turn, and more so than in the Pegasus World Cup. I mean, it's right on the turn at a mile and a 16th. However, a horse of lesser quality, I might be concerned about an outside post, but not here. Fierceness is going to be able to get to exactly where he wants to. I'm not worried about that in the slightest. He towers over this field in many ways, and he apparently is working up a storm. On a speed favoring track, nobody else is really going to give him much of a tussle on the front end. I like Fierceness all the way, and he's a logical single. But there are a couple others to think about. If you're thinking upset, if you think maybe coming firing fresh, you'll need a race, or something like the Champagne Stakes happens where he lunges at the break, which incidentally I don't think would be a problem here. I think he can overcome that against this field. We'll talk about a couple. Inveigled is fairly logical as an alternative. He was boxed into the inside the Mucho Macho Man, and once he was free, he did come running late. His fractures have improved at the same distance as the race prior. So while the class rating was a little low, I think he had an excuse in what was an okay field. Not great. The concerns are that he has lower speed figures at longer distances than he did around one turn. And again, we're not overly certain of the quality of the Mucho Macho Man, but he is one that perhaps should be factoring in the race, but given his running style and whatnot, I think he's really up against it, against Fierceness. If you look at alternatives, No More Time, I think, is extremely interesting. He's by not this time, so 2 turns is exactly what this horse wants. He hopped at the break in the Mucho Macho Man, yet he settled pretty well. And then he had a really swift move on the backstretch, 6 wide before flattening out, which is completely logical because he had a bad break. The bottom line about the Mucho Macho Man is that since it was a very evenly matched field, it was all about position and tactics. And No More Time obviously was at a big disadvantage with a poor break. With a better break this time, a horse that wants 2 turns, I think underneath, you'll probably get a price given that last effort. And I think he's a very logical horse to finish second to Fierceness. So if you wanted to put him in a cold exacta, you might actually get paid with Fierceness at a really short price on top. Then we'll have Dancing Groom as another one that, yes, he had 2 subpar efforts in a row, including this one at this distance, and he was no factor at all in the Jockey Club in his first two-turn race, but he is by Vino Rosso, and Vino Rosso did get better, like wine, with age. So maybe he can, firing fresh, he can come up at a price. So another one, again, to think about underneath in a cold exacta with Fierceness. Now, Otello is logical to talk about, and I know a lot of people are going to say, he looks awful good, and he's a suitable alternative, and, if you want a late runner, maybe he's the one. Well, here's the thing about Otello. First of all, you're going to get way too short a price for a horse who just ran in a race that tactically he had things his own way that allowed him to get up. He got the rail. It opened up for him. It could have easily shut off, and then we would be saying what happened. But it didn't. He got the job done, and he got up in time. He was moving well. There's no doubt about that. And he did improve off of his initial start, but not so much to tell you that he's going to have a big move forward here. Another incremental improvement would only put him maybe third in this race, and the price is too short. Again, he closed well while benefiting from a hole in the rail, but it wasn't a wow kind of win in a race that the quality of it is a little questionable. He's going to need a huge step forward to even come close to dealing with Fierceness, and he is by Curlin, so 2 turns should suit him, but the price to me is way too short, and I'm thinking more of the exotics, but I wanted to mention him because he's one that's going to be on a lot of people's lips when they talk about alternatives to Fierceness. And also Hades. He has a bit of an egg beater gait, incidentally, if you watch him from the head on, which means his left leg kind of veers outward when he strides. And it's just, he certainly ran a nice race last time, but it is an interesting little flaw that may work against him later. Seabiscuit had it, so there you are. But he got away with soft fractions in a state-bred optional claimer around 1 turn last time. And his trainer is 5% with first-time roots. So, to me, Hades, running such a big figure is likely due for a regression. He is on the rail. He does have a tactical advantage in that respect. He should be able to get to where he wants to, either on the lead or just off of it. But I still don't think he's a match for Fierceness. And given the fact that he runs a very similar style to Fierceness, he's likely to get burnt up. So those are horses that I don't want any part of. So long story short, probably talked about this race more than we ought to. It's Fierceness in a single all the way. So if we take a look at our ticket and how we're going to play this, we're going to spread in a couple of races. And there are 2 potential single opportunities in leg 2 and leg 5. And I wouldn't talk anybody out of singling Ben Tornado as well as Fierceness if you want to keep your ticket price small. And I would probably encourage that given the fact we do have what are probably going to be 2 heavy favorites that are likely going to win. But in leg 1, race 8, I think we definitely have to spread, and we're looking for value most importantly. So we're going to use the 1, 2, 4, and 7. In leg 2, in the Swale, I'm not overly confident, not 100%, let's say, that Ben Tornado is going to win with the presence of Legalize and a couple other horses who have reason to move forward. So, as an alternative, I think Legalize you want to include in the mix. And so 1-7 we'll use in the Swale. In the forward gal, I think that we want to spread a little bit there. We're going to use 4, 6, and 7. In leg 4, in the turf race, the name escapes you right now. Sorry. I think they definitely have to spread. It's very logical to use the 2 Pletchers, but I think there are alternatives, and their will to win is a little questionable in their class. So there's some vulnerability there. So I think we need to have some alternatives. So we're going to use the 1, most notably Hammerstein, but I could see throwing Tokyo in there to possibly wire the field again, being the lone speed and being able to slow things down. I don't think it's likely, but it is possible. So we'll use 1, 3, 4, 9. Given the fact that we've got a single and a really short option in race 9, I think we can spread out confidently. We could probably add another one if you want to. And then, of course, in the Holy Bull, we're going to single Fierceness. I think that's the best bet of the day. I don't see anybody beating that horse, and it's not often that I'll say that, but I think this is just a dead cert that the 7 Fierceness in the Holy Bull. So 4 times 2 is 8, times 3 is 24, times 4 is 96 on a 50-cent base. That's a $48 ticket. Keeping it small should allow us, if we can get some value in the first 4 races, with Fierceness coming in, we should be looking pretty good to max out our ROI. But it is a pretty fun sequence. The first 4 legs, I think there are some interesting value plays, and hopefully we can get 1 or 2 of them home. So that's the all 3-year-old pick 5. It looks like a good one if we can, by the time we get to Fierceness, to paraphrase an old song, hopefully we got some value and we can pick the right ones to pick off some of those earlier races. I think there are some opportunities to be had, and it's nice that we can anchor with a horse like Fierceness, who I just can't see being beaten in that spot, and I'm sure most of you would agree with me there. So I hope our analysis helps you with your own wagering strategy, of course, and we'll wish you the best of luck as always. And keep in mind, you do have individual postings for all the stakes races in that race. So if you want a little more in-depth analysis or some ideas about wagering strategy for individual races, it's available on the channel, so take a look at that. If you do like content like this, of course, please like and subscribe. And thanks to all of you who have joined on. We really appreciate it. It's really starting to heat up on the Derby Trail, and that's always exciting. There's going to be more postings from us. We do have one for the Southwest Stakes and the Holy Bull, and we will have postings for the Withers and the Bob Lewis at Santa Anita coming up later on, so be on the lookout for those as well. That's it from here. I'll talk to you soon, and until then, be well.